Hi, welcome to Game Design 1, Week 1, or Module 1, however it works out. We are going to set up Unity, and then we are going to create a project in Unity. Then we are going to record it and upload it to our portfolio website. Let's go. So here I am in the Game Design 1 homepage in Canvas. It might look different to you. The dates might be different, but this is the homepage. I'm going to go to the modules and go to Module 1 Instructor Notes. In Module 1, we should talk about getting our specific version of Unity from the Unity download archive. If you look at the URL for this, it should be pretty easy to just type in unity3d.com, get Unity, download, archive. And in this class, we're always going to be using a 0.3 version of Unity. That is the long-term support release, so it should have the fewest bugs and no new features uploaded. Just stability. We want to avoid bugs as we're making enough bugs of our own. So right now we're using 2020 0.3. Next semester it may be different. In your semester it may be different. So just whatever is listed in the required software information page. It'll tell you which one. So this one says 2020 LTS, which is long-term support. So select the one that is required, and I suggest downloading it with Unity Hub. Unity Hub is a little launcher program. I know I hate launcher programs too, but this one is fairly required for the Unity ecosystem as far as licensing goes, and you can install multiple versions. Maybe down on the line you'll have projects that work in 2020 and then projects that work in 2021. And I have projects that are from Unity 5, which was a long time ago. And you can get several installations from there. So we are going to create a new Unity project in the Universal Render pipeline. If I were you, I would name it Game Design 1. Or, you know what, we actually might call this the indoor level, because that is the first thing that we're going to build. If you have a game graphics class as well, or maybe a 3D virtual environments class, you might specify that this is for Game Design 1 by prefacing it with GD1. And create. So this is the default view that you will see if you're not on a 4K screen. Sorry, mine's really spread out a lot. I wonder if there's a way for me to change that. But in the meantime, this is what Unity looks like. So let's talk about the various zones. I know it's not going to mean much to you. Your level is going to be here. Oh, you can't see that at all. Your level is in here. All right, let's say that you've got a wall here and a light. You do. Those are walls and lights. Those things are going to show up in the hierarchy, which is this area. So if I want to select the directional light, I can select it here, or I can just click on it in the scene view. This is called the scene view. And it is helpfully labeled right up here, right there. It says scene. There's the game tab. Whenever you hit play, the game view will show up. Over here, where the hierarchy is, you can see there's the hierarchy. And then all of our files, our materials, our sounds, our, well, even the scene view that we have, the scene itself, is in the project folder. This is the project folder. I will also call this the assets folder sometimes. So, or it's the same thing. Assets folder. So all of your assets are in one folder called assets. There are other folders that you'll have to pay attention to later, but for now, all of your files all of your files are saved in your assets folder, which is viewable in the project view. And then the inspector is all of the details about whatever you're looking at. So let's say that I've got this light selected. I do. We don't even have to just let's say it like it's selected. We can change the color of the light. Let's see if we can see some of the changes here. So let's just change this to a nice blue tone, or maybe a nice pink. Let's make it a really strong pink. You can see the changes that it's making right here. Let's say that we change the intensity. We can see the changes happening in the scene. So all of the details about your level, all of the controls that you can mess with for whatever object you're holding, those are in the inspector. And that's it. Well, okay, so that's the basics. Here's a couple of changes that I recommend for all of my students. When I hit play, up here in the top middle is the play button, or I like to press Control P to start and stop play mode. I switch to the game tab, but I can't see what's going on in the scene. And sometimes when you are trying to figure out what the problem is, it's really useful to drag this game view down here, somewhere else, so that you can hit play and see the game view and also see the scene view. I'm going to change this. Okay. So let's turn play mode off and let's get rid of all these drawings. I'm going to zoom in on the game tab and talk about this top bar for a minute. Under free aspect, I'm going to recommend that you change this to either full HD or create a new 1280 by 720. You can just hit the plus sign here and change this to whatever resolution that you like. The only reason that you would choose 720p instead of 1080p or even 4K is just if your computer at home is not as powerful as you need it to be, you can save some frames. You can get a faster frame rate with a lower resolution. So I'm going to pick full HD, and that way what I see here is what fits most of the screens that this game may be played on. There is an option to maximize on play, this button right here. Sometimes you'll see me say, okay, well, I enjoy this game. I think it's working correctly. I just want to enjoy it. So I'm going to move around and play this game in full screen. And sometimes you need to scale it up. And then you can really enjoy the game that you made. It's so pink. Right. One of the other things that I like to do is I like to put my console right here. You might see this. This is where all the errors pop up in our code, but we're not going to get to code for a few more weeks, so don't worry about that for now. For now, let's create a new scene. We can go to File and then New Scene, or press Control-N. And we can select the basic built-in scene. It's what's there by default. So by default, this is what I've got, and I'm going to make all of these a little bit smaller so that I've got a lot of space in my scene view to build my world with, or build whatever I want to build with. I'm going to do my best to make sure that any shortcut hotkeys that I use are explained. So let's first talk about going and moving around the scene. Right now I've only got the two things in the scene that came with it. if I right-click and hold down that right mouse button, I can look around like I'm playing a first-person video game. If I use WASD as arrow keys, I can move forward with W, back with S, and strafe left and right with A and D. I can also press Q to go down and E to go up. And so one of the ways that I'll get around my scene is by holding down the right mouse button, turning to look the direction that I want, and strafing to look there. So let's say I want a different perspective. I'll move around like this. I'll move around like this. And so I'm turning the mouse and I'm holding the D button to kind of smoothly move around things like this. And the scene will speed up as you hold it down for longer and longer. If you're very far away from something, you can press Shift to sprint towards the destination that you want to get to. Another way, if you have something selected, I highly recommend F for focus. It will focus wide and focus close up on whatever object you have selected. If you have both of them selected, it will apparently still just pick one. Once you have that selected, I will oftentimes move around that object by holding down Alt and left click. That's your normal click. Left click and drag like this. And you can zoom in with the scroll wheel, zoom out with the scroll wheel, hold down Alt and normal click to pan around your object. And if you've moved off from this, so now the camera's kind of pointed at this area in the middle, when I pan, I'm not going to be panning perfectly around that object anymore. I'm going to be panning around wherever I moved that center point to. If you're really, really far away, you can always double-click in the hierarchy and move to that object again. You can also select it in the hierarchy, right-click to move around, and hit F to focus in again on that object. I think that about covers it. So let's add some objects. I'd like to add a floor, so a plane. Plane is a two-dimensional flat object, and then I'd like to add boxes and cubes and some of the other primitive game objects, they're called primitives, to the scene. So, game object, zoom in a little bit here. Game object, 3D object, and here's our primitives. Planes, cylinders, capsules, spheres, cubes, and quads. Let's add a plane, and that'll be the floor. It will, by default, spawn in wherever you're focused, which can be really useful. So let's say that we set this to 0, 0, 0. And we want to focus, we hit F to focus on this. When we bring in our 3D object cube, it will spawn that cube in exactly the same spot. However, if we're pointing off some other different way, and we hit game object 3D object cube, it will spawn it who knows where, very far away from where we are, and sometimes that can get really wonky. So all we have to do in that case is go to our transform and zero out the position. 0, tab, 0, tab, 0. And then right back to the scene view, hit F to focus, and we're at our new cube. So right now in our game view, our camera is facing the plane from this direction. It's facing in the Z direction. So let's talk about that. So this hierarchy, let's see, can I use all three of these? Yeah. So Z is this direction. And we can say that the X is in this direction. So that's a horizontal movement. Horizontal. Whereas the Z is depth, or forward and back. And then Y is vertical. So up and down. Let's see. And why is it like that? Well, if we pretend that this is, maybe a television, right? An old school television. And we could correspond this to a graph in algebra. In algebra, you have your graph, and the x is this direction, and the y is this direction. Well, same goes in a TV. Your x pixels go this way. It depends on where they start. Sometimes they start 0, 0 up here. Sometimes they start 0, 0 down here. Which would make sense to me if this was the TV section, right, and this was the TV section. Then if we wanted the center of the TV, and let's say that it had 100 by 100 pixels, well, this would be 50 pixels on the x-axis, and this would be 50 pixels on the y-axis, and the center of your screen would be right there, 50, 50. Other software, like 3ds Max, for example, it's a modeling software. They started out thinking of building things where X and Y were laid out flat on a table. And so when they build X, Y, and Z, so if you think of a table here, X is still horizontal, that's fine, but Y is actually depth away from you, and then the Z is vertical. So building up from the table, doesn't matter. Unity only uses, that's all that matters now. I just wanted to let you know there's a distinction. So, camera's facing this way. And we have 2 cubes. This cube is halfway sunk in. I could bring it up, but it wouldn't be perfectly on the ground. Even if I, if I tried, I could get it pretty close, right? But there's an easier way. If you hold down Control and Shift, the icon will change, and it will place itself on whatever object that you have. And it'll set it flat on the ground, which is very convenient. If you want to delete a cube, we can select it and hit delete. That's all we'd have to do. We can't right click on it, but we could go to the hierarchy and select delete. So let's select this. Let's give it a specific place. So 0 means it's centered on the x-axis. Let's say 0.5 so that it is half a meter above the ground. And the reason that it's half a meter above the ground is because it is 1 meter tall, and the pivot point, the middle of it, is half a meter up from the ground. And then we'll do y on the z, 0 on the z-axis. So this is in the middle of the plane, and I'm going to use Control to snap it in, looks like 0.25 meter increments, which is too precise for me. So one of the things I'm going to go do, off from the defaults, is go to Assets, Edit, and then Grid and Snap Settings. That's at the bottom there. So Edit, Grid, and Snap Settings. And when I select that, I'd like to change my increment snap for moving to 1 meter in all directions. We could change it to half a meter, that'd probably be fine too. But this is where we can change our rotation. So when we hold Control, it snaps in 15-degree increments, and when we scale it, it snaps in 1 scale increments, which seems a bit high, but I'm not going to worry about it. And then we can close that window right there. So now when I move it, it moves in 1 meter increments. Much more reasonable. Okay, so I'd like to move this over to the edge. Yeah, sure. All the way kind of off of the edge. And then let's say that we scale it. So I'm using... So let's have a look at these buttons here. Q, W, E, R, T. They're all right next to each other. And then probably Y. Q, W, E, R, T. Q, W, E, R, T. So this is the hand tool. Just moves around your scene. This is the move tool. So X, Y, and Z movement. This is the rotation tool. You can rotate your object. This is the scale tool to make it larger and smaller. This is the rect tool. It's awesome. It lets you scale the object using the corners. And I'll show you about it in just a minute. But I also want to draw your attention to the center versus the pivot. So that's the Z button, toggling between these two. And then the X button switches between global and local space. So if you are moving it relative to its local rotation, you get a different result than if you're using the world space. And I'll show you what that looks like in just a second. But for now, we're just going to scale. So we're pressing R, and I'm going to hold Control and see if it snaps. Yes, it does. So now it has a scale of 1, 1, and 10. Right there. 1, 1, and 10 for the X, Y, and Z. That's good. It's a nice little wall. It's a little bit low for a wall. So I'm actually going to go to the T tool. That's the rectangle tool. And you can select the corners to change like this. And if you want to look at it from a different side, you'll see the gizmo switch. And so you can make it more and less like this. But I'm just going to make mine taller by selecting the edge. And I'll change it up to about 3. And I can see the amount here in my transform, what I'm changing the scale to. So I'll just set this to 3, and I'll make sure that the position is 1.5, so that it all snaps very nicely. And I actually want it to overlap just a little bit, so I'm going to scale it. Oh boy, that's too much. Let's just change that to 11. Okay, so now that I have this wall and I like it, I'm going to duplicate it with Control D. I use Control D all of the time. Control D to duplicate. You can see in the hierarchy there's now a cube and a cube 1. I'm going to press E to rotate, and I'm going to hold down Control to snap it in 15-degree increments so that I rotate it exactly 90 degrees. And then I'm going back to W to move it. And I want you to keep an eye on these 3 squares here. So if I grab this green axis, I just move in one direction. If I grab the blue one, I just move in that direction. Grab the X axis, just move in one axis. But these squares let me move in 2 axes. So up and down, and also forward and back. Or I can do forward and back, left and right. And so you can use these to move in the direction that you want to move. I'm going to press Control Z, go back to where I was, and I'm going to hold down Control so that I'm still snapping. You can see now I'm aligned with that edge, and I'm going to hold this one axis to move this over. And now I have 2 walls that are around the edge of my plane, and that looks just like I want it to. At this point, we can rotate both of these. So I've got both of them selected. I'm going to hit Control D to duplicate. I'm going to switch to the rotation with the E key, and I'm going to hold down Control to snap both of these objects around 180 degrees. Okay, I'm sure you're pausing the video a whole bunch of times saying, wait, I got to do this. That can get frustrating. I have been there. But I want to talk about that center versus pivot button now. So the Z key switches between this. If I wanted to rotate these about their pivot, this is what I would get. Not the same thing, is it? Each one of them are rotating around their own axes. But if I press Z, now I'm rotating around the center of both of those objects. Let's go ahead and... I'm gonna rotate. Let's leave it alone for now. That's enough. I'll do a different example for the next one. My camera can't see this wall, so I'm actually going to delete this wall so that my camera can see all of that area. I'm going to go ahead and just rotate my camera down, move my camera a little bit closer so it can see just a little bit better. Okay, so let's build another cube. And it's off somewhere weird. So I'm just going to press Control and Shift and drag it onto the ground right here. And then I'm going to use the scale tools to make it very skinny and make it long on one edge like this. And then I'm going to duplicate it and rotate it 90 degrees. And now I've got this little cross thing. And what I want you to do is I want you to randomly rotate it. So don't hold Control this time. Switch to your rotation tool, and you can select these lines and only rotate in one direction. So the blue axis is your Z axis, the green axis is your Y axis, and the red axis is your horizontal axis. And when you're thinking about rotating something and you're thinking about how the axes work, consider that your arm is the axis and it's rotating around this arm like this. So this is the horizontal axis, and it's going to rotate kind of towards you or away from you, which is a little bit different than the movement. If we rotate around the y-axis, this is the vertical y-axis, and we're going to rotate around it. So it's going to rotate like this, like a helicopter blade. We can also just click anywhere and rotate it randomly by dragging it around. That's what I'm looking for. Now you'll notice that the rotation resets itself back to using world space, because that's what we're on. We're on this global space. But as soon as we switch that with the X, we notice that it rotates differently. And that way we can rotate relative to the Y axis of this local object. So world space, Y is always perfectly up, but for this particular helicopter blade, Y is kind of over this way. And so if I want to rotate around the local Y axis, I want to switch to local view, and now helicopter blade, but it's at an angle. And if I want to move it, same thing. Maybe I want to move it to be some kind of ramp or stairs that go up to the second area. You know what? That'd be a great thing to build. I'm gonna delete this. Actually, no, it's fine. It can just move over here somewhere. And then game object, 3D object, cube. And let's just move this over here. I am going to rotate it. About 30 degrees is good for a ramp. Not more than 45 generally. 45 is a pretty steep ramp. But you see, I can't move it down the right way unless I'm on the local axis. And then I can bring it down right down to the floor, and maybe even a little bit underneath the floor. And then if I want to scale it, or I can even use rectangles, I can just scale it in that direction. But if I were in world space, I would only be able to scale it like this, which is extremely different. Not at all right. So I'll press X, and I'll switch to the right method of growing this. And I can scale it over here, kind of into the wall a little bit. That's fine. And now I have this handy dandy ramp. Maybe I'll bring it down so that it goes all the way down and you can't even tell that it's rotated. I'm going to duplicate this. Let's see, it's a little bit tall. I just want it to go halfway up the building. I'm going to duplicate this, rotate it back, and then talk about my favorite button. It's called Vertex Snapping. So each one of these objects has a vertex, and that is the corner of any object. And so I've got a vertex here on a different object here. Let's Control-Shift-6. Let's use a different color. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, with this object selected, hold down V, and I'm going to select this one. This one. We'll call this vertex A, and I'm going to drag it to vertex B, and it will snap those two vertices. Well, it'll snap the A vertice where the B vertice is. Ready? Move tool. Hold down V to find the vertex that you want to select. Click and drag to the B vertice. And when you let go, they are in the exact same position. And it's beautiful. And you run into issues where sometimes you run into this thing called texture popping, where you've got two textures that are similar fighting for the same kind of space. We can talk about it later. But for now, there's a ramp for us to use, and it looks perfect. Let's bring it out into this wall, and I think I'm going to draw it this way quite a bit. Okay. So let's look at the rest of the primitives, and then we'll record what we've got and move on to the next thing. So other primitives that we have, 3D object sphere. Let's move this here. And 3D object capsule. This is a good height, by the way, for a person. It's 2 meters tall, which is a little bit higher for a person. And it's nice and rounded. And then we have a cylinder. Again, 2 meters tall, 1 meter wide. And that's really all we need. So what I'd like you to do as you work through these and practice building things is I'd like you to build something out of these basic building blocks. 3D object cube, whether that be a helicopter or a car or a person or an animal, whatever you like. If you can manipulate these objects to match what you want, then you can build anything with basic shapes. Let's take this cylinder. Let's stretch it down quite a bit. And now we have a wheel. We can bring it down. Let's just smack it right there. We can have a maybe a train. Maybe a train. I don't know how many wheels a train has. We can select all 3 of these and duplicate them, and then drag them over here on the other side. Let's center this a little bit better. Maybe we can build a 3D object cube that is just kind of a long rail so that it goes between the 2 wheels, like that. Let's bring you in close like that. Yeah, that's not bad. F to focus. Bring this down a little bit. Sometimes I will be using snapping, and other times I absolutely will not be using snapping. So let's duplicate this. I'll use Vertex Snapping to bring this up. I'll use the rectangle to bring this back. You know what would be even better? If this was kind of a short stack here, and then I had another cylinder, 3D objects, cylinder. Just like that. So let's talk about aligning things really quickly. Let's say that I want this cylinder to be in the same position, this direction. What I can do is hit F to focus this, and then I can select the other object and go to Game Object, Move to View. And it will move to exactly that same position, and then I can just use this X-axis to move it forward. And then it probably needs like a smokestack, so we'll just shrink it all the way down. Hey, how did I do that? You can scale this uniformly by selecting this middle gray area, and it will scale across all 3 axes. Let's duplicate this, scale it down, but scale it up. There we go. All right. This wall's kind of in the way, so I'm just gonna move it out. I can also just turn it off temporarily if I use this little check mark to turn things on and off. So it's still there. I just can't see it right now, and that's awesome. I don't want to see it. So I'm gonna duplicate this. I'm going to shrink one down here, and then I'm going to shrink another down here. And then I am going to turn this sideways, use Vertex Snapping, and then kind of center it. I should probably have one of these going direction as well. Yeah, that's all right. So, please build a train, an object like this, an airplane. I think I built a biplane. That's my favorite thing that I built out of these basic primitives. And then we're going to move on to recording our scene. So, what's the simplest way? The simplest way is going to be to turn off gizmos and use the snipping tool, or snip and sketch. Either one you want to use. If you're on a Mac computer, it's Command-Shift-3 or Command-Shift-4 to take a screenshot. If you're on Windows, Windows key Shift-S brings up the snip and sketch tool, which we can then select. And that will save an image for us right here. And we can press Control-S to save this. And we will save this to, here we go. What do I want to name this? Train 1. We could get another couple of shots for that. Maybe bring that wall back. Oh, how did I get here? Shift and space on any one of these will full screen it. It can be really useful at times, especially for screenshots. And then I accidentally turned my gizmos off, so if I turned those back on, you can see the sun. But we could also just move that up out of the way and then zoom back in and get to our stuff. So this cube is turned off. I'm going to turn it back on, and then I'm going to take another screenshot. Okay, so with our screenshots saved, we are going to let's save our scene and make sure our project is set up. So I like to press Control S to save. File save will take you to the same place. Let's save this in the scenes folder. So don't try to save this somewhere else. It all has to stay in the assets folder. This is your project folder, Game Design 1 Indoor Level, and then your assets folder has all of the assets in it. And I'd like to save our scene in our scene folder. I'm going to name this Scene Train. Yeah. And then we can close Unity, and I'm just gonna leave it open. So let's go to ArtStation. So this is my ArtStation page. Artstation.com/Brian is brilliant. And in the About Me, I have a summary of what I do. I have a contact email. I have links to Twitter and my website and my Vimeo page where some more of my videos are. What am I interested in hiring-wise? What skills do I have? What software do I know? I can even put in productions for things that I built. It even has a portfolio area for work and then previous work. And I want you to fill this out as well as you can, either as a student or just start calling yourself a game developer or a interactive 3D major. But under my portfolio, I'm going to go to Manage Portfolio and then Create New Project. And I want you to do that too. What's the name of our project? We can call this Module 1 Unity Getting Started. Or, you know what, it might be even greater. I'd be greater to just call this Primitive Train. Obviously, if yours isn't train, if you built a helicopter, call it Primitive Helicopter, or just call it Helicopter. Whatever. And I'm going to go to the desktop, and I'm going to select both of my images and drag them in. And after they upload, we can tell it to fit in view, or we can have it maximize width. Well, yeah, I suppose that's the same thing. Let's talk about what this is. Let's talk about that in the description. So in the description, this is the first project for Game Design 1. We were tasked with creating a model with primitive objects. And you can embellish or however you want to say this. Just make sure it at least says this much. We can pick the medium, digital 3D, and then subject matter or software. We definitely used Unity in here. There we go. And then save and publish. So it's going to give you two options once you've got this, to view on community or view on website. And I want you to look at the view on community. That is the link that I want you to turn in for your assignment. It'll look like this. I'll be able to like it or add it to a collection. I'll see that description here and the title. If you add any notes to specific images, I'll be able to see that. And then this URL up at the top, artstation.com/artwork/ a bunch of randomness. This is the URL that I want you to turn in. Just press Control-C to copy and then submit assignment and give this URL. That's it. That's your first introduction into Unity. Talk to you later.